So Mike, if you'd like to kick us off.
That's great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Mike Kane. I'm the Member of Parliament for Wythenshawe and Sale East, and I'm the convener of the Catholic Legislators Network here in Parliament. Usually when I'm addressing people, I welcome them to the Palace of Westminster, but in these strange times, we can't. We have maybe 100 or so Catholic MPs, a couple of hundred Lords. We come together to talk about issues, and we have a weekly mass here in the Palace of Westminster as well. And we coalesce around cross-party around issues for information without coming up with a policy platform. So you're all very, very welcome here today. So the way we always start our meetings as Catholic legislators is with a prayer. So if you join me in a prayer, I'll be very, very grateful. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Right, it's my great pleasure to be chairing this today about the duty of Catholics to engage in public life. The Catholic theologian Karl Rahner reminds us that power is a gift from God, and it's our duty to grow it. Our church is divided into three equal elements, with its liturgical tradition, with its sacramental tradition, but with its social action and social teaching tradition as well. And the main themes, as we all know, are dignity, solidarity, and subsidiarity. But one of the sacred duties is also participation, and that's what we're here to discuss today, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So with that, it's my great pleasure to hand over to Brendan Thompson, who does an amazing job with his team at Catholic Voices to promote the Catholic viewpoint in our media across the nation, who's going to be emceeing the meeting today. So Brendan, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be your MC today. I'm Brendan Thompson, CEO of Catholic Voices. As Mike was saying, Catholic Voices was set up in 2010 when Pope Benedict was coming to visit the UK to try and put the church's case in the public square in advance and during the papal visit. So 10 years on, we try and equip and train Catholics to be more confident in sharing the church's story through trainings, briefings, and through events like this. And as I spoke to the various collaborators that we'll hear from today, this event came up in a conversation, and it was a vision really of, wouldn't it be amazing to see more Catholics kind of actively engaged in public life, helping to inform politicians and policymakers about the needs, the concerns, but also the contribution of Catholics in this country. And I was particularly, I guess, heartwarmed in a way to see that when there was the suspension of public acts of worship, actually many Catholics did get quite involved and active in public life, in a sense, writing to their MPs. But I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we also contributed when we didn't have something we just wanted to complain about? And what would getting involved in that kind of way look like? So what's today's event about? We're focusing on encouraging Catholics' entry into public life in general. So we're looking from the perspective of Labour for Catholics and Catholics in the Conservative to represent all the different political affiliations, as well as this is co-sponsored by the Catholic Legislators Network. So we're steering away from party politics, too much on academic theory. And the real focus today in all of the contributions and the questions is, how do we help Catholics in a practical way to engage in politics and public life? So a little bit of housekeeping just before I introduce the organizations and our speakers. The main way, obviously, we can't see you, you can see us, but we want you to participate. So do say hello in the chat. So you'll see down there's a kind of chat function. So do let us know in the chat. Say hello, say where you're watching from. Presumably from home, but maybe you're somewhere else for work. If you're involved in public life, maybe let us know in what way you're involved in public life. So do just say hi and let us know who's joining us this morning. This will be recorded and it will possibly be released afterwards. So if you do want an access to the recording, do just contact us later and let us know. When we get to, we're going to have two contributions, one from Leo Francis, who's representing Catholics in Labour. Leo Watson, who's representing Catholics in Labour, and Francis Laysock, who's representing Catholics in the Conservative. And then we'll have a chance with all three of our panelists, with Mike Kane MP, with Leo, and with Francis, to have a little bit of time of Q&A. So there's some real interaction. So you've got your Q&A function down in the webinar as well. So the Q&A will be anonymous. So apologies if we don't get round to your question, but do let us know how you're finding the webinar as well. In terms of the running order now, here's the two organisations. We've got Catholics for Labour. So Catholics for Labour, a group aimed at anyone interested in applying Catholic social teaching to public policy, or is considering participating in public life. And you can follow them on Twitter at Catholic Left or Catho Left. And then we've also got represented today Catholics in the Conservatives. So founded in 2020, a grassroots organisation within the Conservative Party, providing support, recruitment and mentoring for Catholics within the Conservative Party and encouraging Catholics in public life. And again, you can follow them at Catholic Tories on Twitter. So without further ado, and with the housekeeping done, I want to introduce our first speaker, Leo Watson. Now, Leo has worked in policy, in campaigns, in public affairs for nearly a decade. And during that time, he's worked on issues of social justice relating to health, welfare, social care, education, youth social action, and securing NHS funding for a last resort Parkinson's treatment. That's his proudest achievement, he said. And for the past 3 years, Leo's worked with Mike Kane to establish and to grow Catholics for Labour, so a group that applies, as we've said, Catholic social teaching to public policy. So thank you very much, Leo. It's great to have you with us. And I'm going to spotlight your video now.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me, Brendan, and thank you all for having me. I'm delighted to be here to talk about the duty of Catholics to engage in public life. And I'll do so, I'll get straight into it, and I'll do so by talking and answering two fundamental questions. Like, one, why should Catholics engage in public life? And two, is there a place for Catholics in today's Labour Party? So why engage in public life? We all work hard. A lot of us raise families, care for our elderly relatives. I mean, we're often too busy to get involved in politics. And if we're not too busy, rightly, a lot of the time, a lot of us are disillusioned by political structures, societal structures, and don't want to get involved. And of course, it must be remembered that political participation is just one of the tools we can use to make this world a better place. In our parishes up and down the country, like many of us are involved in carrying out corporal acts of mercy. Whether that be feeding the hungry, helping the homeless, welcoming strangers, visiting the sick and imprisoned. And clearly that is vital. But politics and political engagement, local and national, is different. That's because, one, it's a vehicle for bringing about systemic change. It's the vehicle through which we can transition our endeavours from the prescriptive to the preventative. And it's the vehicle for achieving social justice. Now, nobody's saying it's easy for Catholics to engage in public life. It does involve making quite often uncomfortable compromises with policymakers to support the poor and underprivileged in our society. But that is what we are instructed to do. I mean, that's what we're instructed to do through the words of the gospel, as seen in Matthew 25 or John 10, and through the words of our Pope Francis, when he tells us that we cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in the fight for justice. Our participation in public life is called for. And for me, participation comes down to one very fundamental question. Do we see our faith as a private or a communitarian endeavour? And that's a big exam question in of itself. But so to just avoid that, I'm just going to say, for me, the answer is clear. And for those of us that agree that it is a communitarian pursuit, then really participating in public life becomes an imperative. And indeed, a phrase that I've come across recently that has really stuck with me is that applying social teaching to public life is to practice the fullness of the faith. And so that's what I've been committed to do, and that's what myself and Mike have been committed to do through Catholics for Labour. And Mike, many, many, many years before that. No offense, Mike. So in terms of turn to my second question, like, is there a place for Catholics in today's Labour Party? I'd like to begin by tweaking a famous quote from the late, great Harold Wilson. And that quote is, well, known to all of you, the Labour Party owes more to Methodism than Marxism. But the way I look at it is that the Labour Party owes more to Catholicism than to communism. In my notes here, it does say pause for laughter. Zoom makes that quite difficult, a bit of a mystery. So I'm going to pretend that happened, and I'm going to thank you all for laughing. But jokes aside, the reason that I'm tweaking that quote is the very formation of the party takes its roots from Catholicism and through the actions of Cardinal Manning in particular. I'm sure you've all heard this, but I'll repeat it because for a Labour person, any person, it is worth repeating, albeit in an abridged version. So take you back to August 1889. The London's dock workers are on strike in a protest threatening to destabilise the country. Cardinal Manning, struck by the peaceful nature of the protest and the strike, actively sought resolution and acted as a go-between between the government and the strikers. And within a month, that had helped ensure that the dockers' demands were met and the strike was ended. Just a year later, the Labour Party was created. And for me, why this is so important, this is a devout Catholic leader inspired by his faith to improve working conditions for some of the most vulnerable in Victorian society. While I accept this was 130 years ago, we established Catholics for Labour in that spirit to show Catholics there is still a significant place for them in the Labour Party today. And let's be clear, I don't think political parties do enough to engage people of faith and can be guilty of treating them with contempt on occasion. I mean, take the Labour Party, for example, over the past couple of decades. We learned from Alistair Campbell, albeit a personal hero of mine, that Labour doesn't do God. Under Ed Miliband, we had a leader who personally didn't believe in God and would state that, but had also state his great respect for those that do, which I guess is progress. And then under Jeremy Corbyn, we had a leader who maintained that his religious beliefs were private and as absolutely his right to do so. But that's a good whack of Labour history where we've avoided faith actively through our leadership. And of course, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the EHRC's findings, which, and I quote, points to a culture within the party which at best did not do enough to prevent anti-Semitism, and at worst could be seen to accept it. So it's against that backdrop we decided to establish Catholics for Labour about three and a bit years ago now. And we did this for three reasons. One, we wanted to show Catholics that they belonged in the Labour movement. Two, we wanted to give them confidence to speak with pride about how their faith and membership were inextricably linked. And three, we want to encourage Catholics of all persuasions, start a movement really of Catholics returning to political life to show that they could engage in public life. And our rallying cry then, as it remains this day, we are Labour because of our Catholic values, not despite them. And I'm proud to say we made some great progress. We established an annual Catholic Mass at Labour Party Conference, which is attended by over 100 people every time. We've held policy seminars with the Shadow Cabinet. We've been a voice for the Labour Party, which has allowed us to build a really strong online community. And through our existence, we were able to articulate our disgust at the treatment of the Jewish community and be a voice for the Catholic community where it's come under attack. And for example, during the recent Labour leadership election, what began with a sensationalized article about Rebecca Long-Bailey's views on abortion ended with an age-old Catholic bigotry from a significant mouthpiece in Keir Starmer's camp, claiming that all Catholics' loyalty is firstly to Rome. Smears that have been used to marginalise and persecute Catholics for centuries and in the world today. Labour Catholic supporters, that's one thing I've learned. Labour Catholic supporters, members, MPs, we're a pretty diverse bunch. And if you'll excuse a crap joke, we're a pretty broad church, if you like. We disagree and hold opposing views on many issues, including abortion and equal marriage. But those views are our own and not the Pope's. I think what's most deflating of all in that respect is that row erupted in a crucible of a leadership election where Labour needed and still needs to seek to become an inclusive movement once again if it's serious about taking power. But the point I want to take from that, to draw away from the negative, the point I want to dwell on is it's precisely because we decided to engage and participate, because we put our hands up, because we threw our hat into the ring, that this old trope did not go unchallenged. The smear was written at 3 p.m. Within an hour or so, we'd organised, and by the next morning, through Mike and Conor McGinn, we had a response which was read with the most read article on Politics Home that week, read by tens of thousands of people. It meant something to the Labour Catholics to see that rebuttal in writing, so clearly articulated by two leading Catholic Labour MPs, and it wouldn't have existed if we hadn't taken time to find our voice. So sort of like drawing to a close. Why do we do it then if it's so hard? I mean, that is actually for me the easy bit. We do it for 4 reasons. 1, it's the right thing to do. 2, we're called to do it in the gospel and through the Pope. 3, it's the vehicle for systemic change. But fourthly, and for me most rewardingly, and perhaps most importantly, we do it to inspire others to participate in public life. It's through establishing groups like Catholics for Labour, Catholics and the Conservatives, that we can inspire people to participate and not what's more, re-engage with their faith. Our church is one of the biggest civil society institutions in the land, and we have a vast number of members with many talents and abilities. It should be our mission to create the leaders of tomorrow. I mean, that is the primary purpose of leadership, to create new leaders. And I speak from experience because that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I went to meet Mike Kane 3.5 years ago to talk about a charity I was working for. We finished our half-an-hour discussion, not with Mike agreeing to carry out the 2 very carefully crafted asks that I'd slaved over for days, but with me agreeing to go to Mass with Mike and subsequently establishing Catholics for Labour 6 hours and 5 pints later. And anyone who knows Mike knows that's a familiar tale. And it's working with Mike over these past 3.5 years, I've rediscovered my faith. And through Mike educating me about Catholic social teaching, that I've been able to fully understand how my party membership is compatible with my Catholicism. And it's under Mike's tutoring or pestering, depending on what mood I'm in, to be quite frank, that I ended up running for council, and I got to understand my community better. I got to engage with my community. I've been able to mentor others to do exactly the same thing. And I mean, I lost that election, and but it's probably the thought that counts from Mike's perspective. So there you go. But I mean, to be serious, I mean that is a gift that I'll forever be grateful for. A gift that you can never pay back, but a gift through Catholics for Labour that I know we've paid forward. So if you allow me to just bring my speech to a close, I want to finish with a quote from the Catholic President-elect, Joe Biden, who said in his victory speech, every time I'd walk out of my grandpa's house up in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandma would say, "No, Joey, spread it." And for me, there are few better ways to spread the faith than to engage in public life. And that's why it's our duty as Catholics to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo. I'm just conscious in the chat, it might look a little bit quiet to attendees. All the panelists can see all the wonderful places that everyone's engaging with. So if you have a particular comment or some phrase that has stood out for you, a kind of insight that you want to share with others, make sure that on the drop-down list it says panelists and attendees if you want to let everyone see your comment. Otherwise, it's really great to see everyone who's participating, and really grateful to Leo for his contribution. I'm now going to invite onto the virtual floor Francis Lassock, who is the co-chair of Catholics in the Conservatives. Francis is a former Conservative Party campaign manager, running marginal seat campaigns through some of the most turbulent years in recent politics, and works in Westminster as a political aide. Francis, it's really, really good to have you with us.
Hello and good morning, and most of all, thank you for having us, and it is absolutely brilliant to see so many people in from so far afield. This will be a quick introduction to Catholics in the Conservatives, and also the brief perspective from me as a political minion on some of the mechanics of political recruitment and why it's important. So Catholics in the Conservatives, we were set up in January 2020. We're a new initiative as the result of conversations sort of from multiple quarters about lack of pastoral support for Catholics in the Conservative Party, and also a feeling that there's always a need for more encouragement of Catholics into public life. This possibly isn't the best example, but it is a personal anecdote. The reason I got involved, I've been a member of the Conservative Party since university. I started working for the Conservative Party when I graduated. It's been pretty much my entire adult life. Last year, I went to an event at Conservative Party conference organised by the Catholic Herald and the Catholic Education Service. I think it was either the first or the second they'd done like that. And I met people there who I knew professionally, knew as colleagues, but didn't know were Catholic. I thought, ooh, that's interesting. We're missing something here. Our aims are support, recruitment and mentoring of Catholics in the party and encouragement of Catholics in public life. There are two sides of this. One of which is we all know the people who follow the Church's instruction of engagement in society, engagement in public life, being the salt and light in their community. The people who are civic minded, the people who run food banks, school governing bodies, the people who manage their professional family obligations with doing something for charity, the people where you meet them and think, right, that's the kind of person who should be in government. That's the kind of person who should be in a council in public life. The problem is twofold. Politics can be partly perceived as a little bit of a closed shop. And also, it isn't always clear if you want to be an MP or a councillor how you go about it. And often the best people are those who don't put themselves forward unasked. So our mission is to enable and support people of faith to public office, encourage them to public office, and also on quite a granular level, demystify the process of how do you become an MP, how do you become a councillor. The second aspect of what we do is support for people within politics. Politics, like really any profession, has its own unique challenges. Any person of faith in politics probably is people they can speak to from a faith perspective and people they can speak to from a political perspective, but they might not have someone who they can talk to who understands them both as a person of faith and who understands their particular unique political context. And politics is something that can encompass your life. It's quite good to be able to, when something is that big for you, to be able to share your faith within that. And it's the sheer pastoral element of, similar to the Legislators Network, a format where we can pray together or talk about faith. We're very early days, we're less than a year old. There's one thing we're not, and that's a policy organisation. We do not take policy positions and we don't advocate for them. What we want to do is get people of faith into politics, both party membership, all levels of elective office, and support them once they're there. The related question is, of course, why do this? I think most of us in this room probably agree that Catholics should have a place in the public sphere, where we feel quite strongly about family policies, we feel pretty strongly about faith schools, we feel very strongly about charity. We have a church where the position is clear that we should be out in society and using the temporal order. The church, we know what we should do. Politics is the rather difficult and more nebulous question of how. There are people who will say either explicitly or more often implicitly that Catholics shouldn't enter public life or public office. And what they mean is politics is an imperfect human concern. There are times for every politician where they're going to be faced with two bad decisions. Politics isn't unique in that, that's true of a lot of professions, but because of the nature of politics, those bad decisions tend to be quite well publicised. Some people, there's sort of a subtle argument that it's easier for people of faith to stay away. We're also quite good in the church at engagement on some levels of politics. We're pretty good at lobbying. We're good at saying this thing matters, right to your MP. Just to give a perspective of a party minion from inside the machine. We live in a representative democracy and decisions are made by people. People are influenced by their own beliefs and backgrounds. And so the question is, when someone's going to be faced with two bad decisions, who is that person? Do we want it to be someone who is going to consider the perspective and morals of faith? One of the great and terrible things about working in campaigning is how much I've stumbled across about the mechanics of how people make decisions. And we're not, and there's a lot of quite interesting science on this. We're not particularly rational creatures. And all of that is a bit of a long way of saying that we're quite good at doing things like writing letters to MPs, lobbying MPs, and all of that has an impact. But at the end of the day, the single most effective way to shape a decision is to get a seat around the table. Linked to that is how much power, and I say power, how much importance and influence is in the hands of people that you don't necessarily notice. Most of what you see locally is probably down to your local council. A lot of the things that we care about, faith schools, looked after children in your local area, local charities, so basics of what the funding is, supporting youth clubs, foreign aid. Big example is churches. A lot of that is decided by local or national government. If those things matter to us, we should be there. And the recent example is the closure of the churches. I think most of us in this virtual space would agree that faith is an essential service. It wasn't considered as such, not maliciously, but it just wasn't considered as such by those writing the legislation. That's why we need to be around the table. And there are positive examples of that as well. If you look at the work of someone like Ian Duncan Smith on supporting the family, if you look at the moral imperative from the Pope on climate change and environmentalism, the bodies that deliver that are, as well as charities, the most powerful ones are local and national government. So moving on to the question of how do we do this? Before my current job, I did candidate recruitment on and off for nearly 5 years. And the lesson from that was that often the best people are the ones who don't put themselves forward, sometimes don't push past resistance or apathy, or who are worried about what politics might mean. There's one thing that you tend to hear a lot, and that's I'm broadly a Conservative supporter, or broadly, if you're in the Labour Party, broadly a Labour supporter, or broadly a supporter of another party. But I can't reconcile this with one particular policy. And also, I'm worried that signing up to a party would mean that I'm going to be told what to do. In the UK, we're a two-party system, and there's a sort of popular misrepresentation of party membership that it means kind of almost selling your soul to the current leadership of the party and every policy they espouse. Leo's actually done a far better job than I ever could of explaining why that's wrong. But if you talk to parliamentarians, councillors, members of any party, what you'll get, or what you should get, is a belief in their party running through them like a stick of rock, a belief that that party is the best means to do right in the world. But what you'll also get is probably more intelligent and informed disagreement with some certain aspects or policies of that party than you get from a member of the public. And the reason is that is because those people care. Joining doesn't mean signing away all your morals or intellect to the current leadership of that party. In a two-party system, we've got two very broad church parties with wings within them, and taking a role with them means engagement with their political alignment, and this is a very crucial and ability to play with the team. One quick plug for someone who's neither a Conservative nor a Catholic is a gentleman called Andy Flanagan, who's the author of a book called Those Who Show Up. Andy Flanagan is very involved with Christians on the left. And what he outlines in the book is that we all know people who say, you know, I joined the party were it not for this particular thing. There are obviously limits to that. If you're a free marketeer, there are some parties that won't be right for you. If you're very left-wing, don't join the Conservatives. But if you are broadly aligned with a particular party, join and make your case, because decisions are made by the people in the room, and history is full of successful players who joined and played the long game. So sort of wrapping up, the question what our engagement is in public life is pretty much a question of, you know, what is our responsibility to society? If we have that, then we have a duty to engage in politics and the political structure as part of that. There's also one other thing about faith that's sort of happening subtly now, possibly triggered by the pandemic. We saw amazing efforts by communities. We suddenly became people that asked after our neighbours, but also we shut the churches, and everyone in the first couple of weeks when they were frightened, they turned out and they started publicly worshipping the NHS. There's this sort of subtle move that faith is something that's supposed to be in the private sphere, the unspoken idea that, you know, faith is great, people are able to have it, but it's not something for public life. As Catholics, we can actually fall into that trap a little bit if we start saying that Catholicism isn't mainstream, that we're somehow countercultural, that you can be a Catholic or you can be involved in public life, that it's a binary choice. It's in politics and public life that we can combat that, that we show faith as a vibrant part of the mainstream, that it's what drives us and people in public life to do good in the world. And sort of wrapping up, 10 years down the line, our biggest problem as people of faith, it might well be relevance. It may well be that people are against Catholics, as they have been in the UK in the past, but a little bit like the people who wrote the legislation about churches, that they just don't think about the importance of faith. And if we want to change that, if we want to have a voice in the public sphere, we've got to be prepared to enter it ourselves. And ending on a quick plug, if you happen to be a Conservative or voted Conservative last time, don't need to be a party member, but if you want to hear more and join a new group of people trying to change that, do consider signing up to Catholics and the Conservatives. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Francis and Leo. So we're going to move now into a kind of time of Q&A. Just to note that we're going to prioritize. I noticed lots of people are putting questions in the chat. We'll try and look through the chat a little bit, but questions will be prioritized that are posted in the Q&A. So if you want to have a Q&A, make sure that it's seen, to please do that through the Q&A section. But I've been going through a little bit, and different people have indicated, and I guess it's been indicated with some of the things that the speakers have said as well, about some of the difficulties one might face, or some of the kind of barriers. I've got a question from Daisy here. It says, the stereotype of Christians in political life seems to be those from evangelical free church traditions. What do you think? Why do you think that is? And what do you think that why denominations have such a disproportionate profile in Parliament? So maybe we can widen this question as to, Leo spoke a little bit about, you know, what does a specifically Catholic contribution look like? Or, you know, of course, there's this need to work with other Christians in Parliament, with other faiths in Parliament. But what is, I guess going through, what are the difficulties, the practical difficulty one might get? Why might there be this view of some of, you know, it's only a certain type of Christian that gets involved in politics, say? Anyone from the panel can begin to address.
Just picking up on that one, I'm not sure actually it is a matter of pure numbers. I think the numbers of evangelicals and practicing Catholics in politics might well be quite similar. What we found starting Catholics and the Conservatives was, it's not so much that Catholics aren't there. The evangelicals are, well, they do what it says on the tin, they're evangelicals. They're very good at organising. And they come from a slightly different heritage to us, and they are very, very used to being open and evangelical about their faith. And there is an organisational structure there that actually possibly Catholics in politics either don't have, or we've just been slightly less emphatic. And I think actually it's not in any way a negative towards them. It's an example, it's a model that we can follow, and I think we should. The other possible follow-up, we have all been to ecumenical services that either are so broad as to mean nothing to anyone, or are very evangelical and well-meaning, but very evangelical in tone that actually is off-putting to Catholics. With that caveat, evangelicals are often our friends and allies, because if you look at what they care about on matters of policy and faith in politics, a lot of their concerns are actually the same. And this is a personal view, if what actually we're combating is the erosion from faith in the public sphere, I think there is a lot to learn from how the evangelical wing of the Protestant Church goes about doing things.
Yeah, sorry, Brendan, just to to jump in. I mean, I completely agree with everything Francis has said. And I think the thing that's particularly noteworthy for me, and Francis mentioned it in her speech, is about when we set up these groups. It's amazing how many Catholics come out of the woodwork and it's, oh, I'm a Catholic, and then they'll engage and they'll be emphatic about it. But we do so in private rooms. We do so behind closed doors. We're not good at being evangelical, in my experience. And yeah, I think we can learn, exactly as Francis says. We can learn from people like that. I think what's interesting is, you look at what does it mean to be a Catholic in public life. It's a really deep question, because if you look at one side, you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, and then you've got Ian Duncan Smith, and then you've got Mike Kane, and you've got Rebecca Long Bailey. What areas unite these people? And I think that's what we should be seeking to find as well. Where can we all unite? There's plenty that divides us, but I think there is much more that unites us, and that's what we sought to do as Catholics for Labour. And I mean, I challenge that. I know Catholics in the Conservatives don't do policy, but I challenge myself and Francis to go away from this room today and find one area at least. And I've seen some in the chat that I already agree with. I'm sure we both could, where we could come together and be a united voice, because I think that would do enormous good for our community.
One of the things that's already been said in the chat as well from Annie was, I love the organic quality of this event. So for once, people from different perspectives are coming together in friendship, and that was part of our thinking when we, kind of envisaged this event. So not only is it about offering concrete and practical support, which we'll look at what that kind of practically looks like, and Francis has given a lot of food for thought in that area, but in an increasingly divided and kind of divisive public conversation, I think conversations in spaces like this are good. So that's a really good question, and a kind of follow-up for, what are some kind of mutual policies. And another question, I guess, that has arisen from the chat is, what are the spaces in which Catholics can all come together on something? Why aren't there more? There was Leo spoke about the pushback from Labour about, let's not have this anti-Catholic bigotry, or questioning some of that. What does continuing to question some of the stereotypes around the privatization of faith look like? I don't know if, Mike, from a kind of personal experience, but also from Francis and Leo, thinking about how you work with people and try and get people, into the kind of machine of government and politics.
Thanks, Brendan. Well, I mean, really, there's very little politically I agree with Ian Duncan Smith, but I play football with him every Tuesday morning. And while he was Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions, I tackled him one day and he went down injured. And as I helped him up, I asked him if he was fit for work, as if it was an assessment for his benefit, which he chased me down with the ball a bit later on. But if you want to hear a great speech, listen to the speech he gave in Parliament in honour of the former speaker, Catholic speaker Michael Martin, when he died, about how difficult, how they discussed faith after Ian was deposed as leader of the Conservative Party. And the difficulties he had as being the first Catholic leader of a mainstream political party in the UK, because we can't technically claim Tony Blair because he became Catholic after leaving office. But that is a terrific speech that will be recorded on Hansard about faith, about leadership, and he's the only Catholic leader, as I've said. We've had no Catholic Prime Minister, and if you look across the pond, Biden is only the second Catholic to become president of the United States, and in Labour's position, we've had only ever one Catholic to run for the leadership of the Labour Party, and that was Rebecca Long Bailey. So, both of us here, Francis, Leo, Catholics in the Conservatives, Catholics for Labour, it is about the leadership of the future and bringing people forward who will become not just councillors and MPs and governors, but become cabinet ministers and become leaders of of the future.
I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that. So,
and actually, sorry, I think just pretty much second what Mike has said, and also a related topic less to do with faith and politics, but sort of to do with politics in general. it's inherently adversarial. That's often the case. That's fine. We get into the habit sometimes of, and all parties are guilty of this, of sometimes people just sit around and slag the others off. It puts off the public, and also it puts off people of faith, because people look at that and think, why on earth should I engage with that? And if cross-party we're able to sit around and focus on the things that do unite us, then that's actually quite, hopefully, that is something that reminds people that everyone in politics is there because they think it is the right thing to do, and they want to make a positive difference in the world. And sometimes political dialogue does mean that people can forget that.
There's an interesting suggestion here that was seconded by someone else from Nigel as a practical suggestion around drafting a formal statement for political parties to sign up, saying that Catholics are welcome in the party and that their freedom of conscience will be respected or protected by the party, e.g. The examples given: free votes on matters of conscience, clamping down on social media abuse of Catholics within the party. So I don't know whether maybe something like that exists and it's not widely known, or so if anyone wants to kind of speak into, it's more of a kind of a thought of a suggestion, maybe something to kind of go away and think on. But yeah, either responding to that or thinking, you know, if you're a Catholic listening now and thinking, okay, this is quite interesting, all of this, but what do the kind of next stages look like? You know, for Leo, it was kind of, he had the privilege of kind of talking to Mike Kane personally because he was already involved in some sort of work. So is it that you kind of get involved in a party first, or do you get involved in some kind of social action first, and then that gives you the platform to be able to talk? You know, I don't know whether you want to speak to, again, kind of granular, some of the kind of practicalities around involvement. You go on, Leo.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, we had a question from Daisy. First and foremost, I think that's Daisy from Million Minutes, and a great youth social action organisation that I want to give a big plug to. Yeah, you know, there are a million ways in which you can get involved. It is go to a local party meeting. It is undertake some social action, youth social action, or adult social action. It's putting your hand up, and it's difficult, and it is challenging. Like I cried after my first Labour Party meeting when I was 16. I thought, who are these people? They're so strange. But I went back and I found the people that sort of matched my opinion, and it was difficult. And yeah, I was lucky enough to have a meeting with Mike. But you know, what I tell to everybody is just literally go to your local party meeting. Get involved in corporal acts of mercy in your parish, and you will be subsumed by these people. Like Mike is great at it, but so are so many others. I like to think that I've learned from Mike. It's like you see these people, you see particularly young people who haven't been engaged before. If you're just getting involved, they'll take you under their wing and they'll give you all the support and all the mentoring, anything that you want. Because that's what we're here to do. And so I would say, you know, best way to get in touch with us is we can send our email around to attendees afterwards, but also through our direct messaging on Twitter. We respond to those. We mentor people off the back of that. So yeah, just put yourself out there and see what happens. And you know, if first you don't succeed, try again.
Brendan, could I just chime in there? I wasn't going to say much at all on this, but I think it's an appropriate point. My name's Chris Whitehouse. I'm the secretary of the Catholic Legislators Network, which is purely an administrative role and gives me no right to speak in this seminar whatsoever. But we've approached this quite rightly and understandably so far from a purely lay perspective. I'm aware that we've got some representative of the Catholic Bishop Conference of England and Wales on the call, and possibly some of the hierarchy as well. I want to issue a challenge to them, first of all, to promote politics and engagement in political life, public life, as a noble profession. There's too much sniggering at politicians and not enough promoting of the importance of that role, the dignity of that role, and the fact that it is a deep vocation. We acknowledge the vocations of nurses, doctors, teachers, nuns, and priests. We should acknowledge the vocation of politicians as well. I've been working in the Commons for 40 years, and ultimately, even those that I disagree with vehemently on things, I can appreciate and respect their motives and their aspirations. Disagreed with Gordon Brown on virtually every policy he brought forward, but I had the deepest respect for his focus and determination to address social dysfunction and discrimination. Absolutely no doubt about that being his motive, any more than there is doubt that it was Ian Duncan Smith's in setting up his team. So I throw that challenge back to our hierarchy. They need to promote the dignity and the value of the vocation of politics and public service. They need to look at the diocesan structure. If they have a diocesan vocations director for the religious, what are they doing to encourage young people at a diocesan and parish level to enter political life? If, as the common message seems to be today, a Catholic place is in their political party, what are they going to do about it? How do we build that? Yes, there's a wonderful internship program, but most of the interns so far don't end up active in politics after they've done the program. So how do we bridge that gap? I spoke to one bishop who congratulated us on organising this event and wondered how many people we were hoping to have on the call. I said it would be nice to think we had one from every Catholic parish in Great Britain. I don't think we've made that by a long, long way. That's just my 2 pence for the day, that it's not all about how we welcome people into the world of politics. We can try and do that, but if there aren't people queuing up being told to knock at the door, then we're going to struggle. So that's my thought for the day. Sorry to take the liberty of intervening.
No, you're of course very, very welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. Somebody's made a good plug speaking about Pope Francis' recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti. And in it, but I'd particularly, if you want to go do some further reading, I'd recommend chapter 5 and 6. So particularly in chapter 5 talks about the regeneration of political service to, kind of better kind of politics for the common good. And chapter 6, which I'm particularly passionate about, like the regeneration of civility, dialogue, social friendship. And you can already hear from hopefully the tone of this webinar, but also, whether it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek tackle on the football pitch between parties, that I think that if we as Catholics can recover and be a model for that as well. So I think something like this, if it can push the needle in the kind of way that Catholics kind of do this, I think culturally doing it clandestinely in the past, but being a bit more upfront and a bit more public about it would be excellent. We've got a question here from Mary Palmer, who's representing the Catholic Students Network, and particularly asking, practical advice for students. So, students is kind of one of those kind of key transition moments in life. What advice would you give to students, apart from already what been given about, the wanting to go into public life? What kind of things can they be doing while still at university? And particularly, I guess, in pandemic time, it makes it a bit more difficult. So I don't know if anyone has a particular advice. Some of these things are more difficult because of the situation we find ourselves in at the moment.
Probably wrapping that one in as well with the point about granular detail of how you get involved. Students, they are the valued, genuinely, I think the valued lifeblood of most mainstream political parties, because they've got enthusiasm and because they've got time. To go into politics, you don't need to have been in politics forever. In fact, some of the, particularly MPs, the best people who have something to bring to the table have done something else first, but you do need an understanding of the structure and a particular understanding of your party. Doing that whilst a student is quite a good opportunity because it's unusually vibrant and because you will have the time, get involved in campaigning, meet, network, meet people, talk to MPs, talk to councillors if you're looking at that as a career option. Understand how and build up your political CV. In terms of how to get involved, seconding the others really, first and most important step, join the party. Not all parties at grassroots level are as welcoming as some others. We've all heard the nightmare stories of the first time you turn up to a meeting and it's 4 people in a room who want to go on about something of no relevance for about 4 hours. what we are quite bad at in political parties is not explaining and making the process of standing and membership transparent. I'm involved with another hat on how to get more women involved to public office within the Conservative Party. And what we do there is the basics of, okay, you're thinking of standing, join, start campaigning. This is how, this is what the application process for being a councillor look like. This is what you'll be asked. These are the steps. To become an MP, this is what you'll be asked. This is what the interview will look like. These are the steps. And I think we possibly need to start incorporating that stuff on a more granular level when we're talking about getting Catholics into politics as well, because it can be quite cryptic. And also just to second pretty much entirely what Chris has said. And the very good point from Jackie in the chat about public life. We're here as representations from political parties. That public life does not only mean elected office, and we need people of faith at every decision-making level, and that includes things like leaders of charities and the civil service.
Brendan, if I can add as well, you know, our social doctrine does talk about political parties. You know, it has a whole chapter, and that they exist to interpret the aspirations of civil society. Francis is exactly right. Here I am agreeing with Conservative. You know, decisions are made by people who show up. So, you know, if you want your values in the political realm, you have to show up. Now, the question you asked was about students. Well, that was a long time ago for me. But I remember running a campaign for a guy I really liked when I was 18 years old, and it was a student halls campaign in Liverpool, and nobody had voted Labour in 10 years. There was a far more left-wing version, and while they had a mantra of all the things they wanted to change and nationalise and do, we went student to student and asked them, well, you know, what would improve their life? And they said, well, actually the sewer pipes leak and there's a terrible smell. So the first issue in our manifesto was that we'd fix the pipes. You know, we were listening to their aspirations. We won that election hands down, and that was the first time in 10 or 15 years that you know, Labour had won a student halls election unbelievably in Liverpool. So, you know, if you do aspire to a better society and that Augustinian notion of the world as it is and the world as it should be, you know, there's a journey to get to the world as it, you know, could be, and political parties, you know, are important in that journey.
And can I just add on top of that, as somebody who's worked almost exclusively in charities and gone down that line instead of the party track, I'd really plug that as a way to get engage yourself in public life. Like it's a privilege. You get to pick your issue. You know, I've worked for Parkinson's UK, National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society, City Year UK, and now the Careers and Enterprise Company, not a charity, but somebody working for the public good. You pick your issue, you can become an expert on your issue, you plug it to politicians, you provide the voice for people in our society who perhaps don't have that voice. You learn how to work in coalition with people to bring a message to MPs, and you learn how to compromise. It is an absolute privilege. In answer to the question, like, how do you do it as a student? The only thing I can say is I was the laziest student in the world. The only thing I learned as a student was how to become fantastic at FIFA, and I am truly fantastic. But my life was pretty empty at university, and I didn't realize why it was so empty until after I left, and I pursued a career and then started volunteering, and then, you know, got involved in all this. So if you're a student right now, I would say the temptation, I mean, I think there was a term where I didn't get up in the AM. So, like, I think, you know, the temptation might be, I know it's difficult with lockdown, but when lockdown is released, the temptation might be to stay in bed, not to do it. It is harder, but I would say your life will be so much happier, so much more fulfilled if you do. And that's just a fundamental issue of well-being. So do it, get out there, get active.
And I'm conscious in one of these events, thank you very much, everyone. I'm conscious in these events that it can just become about the insurmountable challenges. And if you wanted to deal with any of these challenges in sufficient depth, which we ought to, I think we should kind of take these one by one. We did promise that it's not going to be about that. So I think, in a sense, I want to reframe it and ask, maybe starting with Mike, but also hear from others, what have been some real highlights about your involvement as a kind of Catholic in public life? Like, there are, of course, the challenges, and it's not to put those to one side, but maybe some kind of key wins, or just moments that have made you proud, and it was good to be a Catholic and to be in the fray because of such moments.
I think the Ashia Bibi campaign, the woman who was on death row in Pakistan for 8 years, that really united Catholics in Parliament. And I was fortunate to raise it with Prime Minister Theresa May at the time. And it was really interesting to see how so many people came together to back that campaign. In the end, she didn't come to the UK, but she got safety. And that wouldn't have been done by my question alone. That was done by so many Catholic MPs coming together on that issue. Just on a personal favourite, if I can make a party political point, was I was desperate when we set this up with Leo. We had a conference at Brighton, and I booked this church, and we were going to the 6 o'clock mass on the Sunday night, and I was just desperately worried that nobody would show up. And I know that our faith isn't about the numbers in the room, but I just thought, this right out the gate, this just won't happen. And the priest had said to me, forgive me here, but he said, oh, the Trade Union Congress, TUC, had tried this a few years ago. We got 3 people. And I'm going, oh, I've definitely got more than 3 people coming. And anyway, as he rang the bell and came out, you couldn't get in the church. And that was an amazing, amazing feeling. And what I learned from that is that being convener of the Catholic Legislators Network and getting involved in public life isn't about a measure your Catholicity. Don't worry about that bit. But what has been really interesting is that the social action of Catholics for Labour has actually brought people back to the faith, which has been quite to the practicing bit of the faith. I know there's a strict rule of what a practicing Catholic is, but if you're Catholic and you're engaging in corporal acts of mercy, for me, you're pretty much a practicing Catholic. So it's bridging that, particularly for students and young people.
I don't know if either Leo or Francis wants to talk about any particular highlights.
I'll let Francis go first, since we had Mike.
Well, for me, in terms of politics, it would be the perspective of a campaigner rather than a legislator or someone who's been part of the executive. The example, actually, if we're talking about getting people into politics, that stands out is the occasions, and one sort of jumps out where you meet someone as an activist, they say, right, I'm interested, they are involved in charity, they have exactly the right qualities that you want to see within politics, but they say, oh, I'm not sure whether I should do this, I'm quite young, do I have the right kind of experience? They do put their name in, they do get onto an approved list, they do get selected, they get put up in a ward not held by the Conservatives in not a particularly good year, but they work it. And then on polling day, they win with a majority in a ward of about 10,000 people of 33. And you see the ballot papers in a 3-member ward, so people have 3 votes. And you see a couple of ballot papers where people have only voted for them and not for anyone else. So that's actually not in a way, a direct example, but more focusing a little on recruitment, and that sometimes the right people are absolutely out there, and what they need in order to get there can just be the right nudge at the right place and time.
Great. Really briefly, Leo.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything everyone said, and just the only thing that hasn't been said for me is meeting people. Like, I met Francis really for the first time properly today. I think Francis is fantastic. His speech was fantastic. It's what we need to hear in this community. When we're unlocked down, I hope to meet you, Francis, properly and go for a drink or something. It's meeting people like Liam Allmark at the Catholic Bishops' Conference. It's meeting Mike Kane. It's meeting Daisy from Million Minutes. It's a privilege. It's an honour, and it reaffirms your faith, and it makes it it just makes you feel good about the world when the world can be a dark, dark place. And to me, it's been challenging world for the past, number of years, to be honest. Whatever side of political persuasion you're on. So I can't put a greater value on that. And so getting involved gets you to meet all these people and really shows you the light and that there's hope for the future.
A real conscious of time, it just leaves me to say we'll offer. I'll swing back to Mike in a minute to end with a final prayer, final glory be. But just a profound thanks to Mike, to Leo, and to Francis for their really edifying contributions. And this is the start of a conversation. And hopefully for some people, it's been a chance to kind of reframe or just rethink the way that Catholics can and ought to engage, despite the difficulties, but feel encouraged and feel more confident about the possibility of that. I'm just putting a link in the chat. We've got a feedback form, so if it takes less than 2 minutes to do, and one of the questions that has arisen is, well, how do I get involved? Or in this, if you want to find out more about events run by the various different organizations represented, do fill in that feedback form and you can select the groups that you'd like to hear back from. So please do fill in that feedback form. And also in the follow-up email that will come tomorrow or something, there's the link to that if the chat ends and you miss the feedback form link. And please just join me in saying thanks to everything that's been said. A really edifying meeting I had today. I think you'll agree. So unless anyone else has got anything they want to say, I think I'll pass over to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Helen's put in the chat that's been really uplifting. So it has been really uplifting and inspiring. So my huge thanks to you, Brendan, Catholic Voices, and Lisa there for all that you do in promoting the Catholic voice in the media. To Chris Whitehouse for his tireless efforts and fine organisational ability with the Catholic Legislators Network and getting this on. We've had 73 participants today, which has been absolutely tremendous. A few words of thanks from the politicians here in the Palace, but to Nigel and James at the Catholic Union who give us so much help and support and research, and also those of you from the Catholic Bishops' Conference as well, who help us through some tricky decisions as Catholics in public life. I am eternally grateful and couldn't do the job I do without all those people that I've just mentioned. So we will come back again, I'm sure, Brendan, with other ideas on the terms of the social teaching where we can cooperate and encourage more Catholics into public life. So thank you all so much for participating today, which was our theme. So we'll finish with a prayer and we'll say goodbye. Okay. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless everyone. Bye-bye.